So let's cover the defensive backs. You've already started there. Martinez spoke and kind of gave his take on everything. And I think the thing that I'm hoping for out of the defensive backs, and as far as depth goes, I mean, I think that's the whole thing. You saw it in that ball game. It was just oof. Like they had you lost Taylor, and just the biggest piece of your defensive backs was out for that game, just prepping for the NFL, and thankfully, ultimately, he was drafted, and good for him. So it seems like it paid off on his end, but oh boy, those guys got roasted against Purdue, and you just the drop off from one line to the next on the set of defensive backs was just bad. I mean, how else do you say it? Tennessee's pass defense last year was bad. Let's not pull punches. You can try to talk around and be like, well, they played a lot of snaps and they bit a bit. Even if they didn't play a lot of snaps, they just weren't very good, and it was really rough. And so you kind of go, well, maybe the only place to go is up from here. And I think that is probably true. You lost a very, very vital leader in Alontae Taylor. You lost a really solid player in Theo Jackson. You lost a nice player in Kenneth George. And that's tough, but you're also gaining. And I think this is where I think Heupel and Banks are really hoping things improve. You got some transfers. You got Wes Walker. I keep thinking Wes Welker. Andre Turrentine, however that might be pronounced. And then you got some freshmen coming in too. And you got to be just praying to God that those guys can come through. I think Walker's the guy that you look to because he has the most experience. Turrentine, coming from Ohio State, maybe he has the highest ceiling. He was a 4-star player and went to Ohio State, recruited by Ohio State. So you got to think, I mean, there's some serious talent there, but he doesn't have the experience of Walker coming from Georgia Tech. So do you think that could end up paying off for Tennessee so far? And what did Martinez have to say about those guys?
Well, it's certainly not going to hurt Tennessee. Just like you said, there's really nowhere else to go but up. They're Martinez likes those guys. He likes their athleticism. I think that's why Tennessee brought them in specifically. It wasn't so much that where they went or this or that. It's because they liked their athletic profile. They thought they fit well in the defense. Obviously, like you said, Walter's got more experience, so he's probably more comfortable in the defense, which is something Martinez alluded to on Friday when he spoke to the media. And he also talked about how competitive they are. And that's something else that Josh Heupel has really made a priority in his quarterback and really his entire roster is just that competitive nature. Because obviously in the SEC, you need 4- and 5-star guys to succeed, but you also need guys that want to win. And sometimes that might mean a 3-star is a better option than a 4-star. And that's not to make an excuse for Tennessee missing on a 4-star player or a 5-star player and finding a hidden gem. You still got to land those talented guys. So nobody's making excuses for Josh Heupel in that regard. But sometimes those are your best guys. Look at Cam Sutton, was a 3-star guy. Emmanuel Mosley was like a 2-star, borderline 3-star guy. But they were very competitive, and they came to Tennessee, made the most of their opportunity, and now they're both in the NFL. So those are the type of guys that Tennessee is looking for, and it seems like they found them in Walker and Turrentine, and we'll see. How they still got to do it on the field. They can have a good fall camp. We can like their athleticism. We can like their competitiveness. But ultimately, all that matters is what happens on Saturday. So I feel better about the depth. Josh Heupel commented about how he feels better about the depth in the secondary and at linebacker on Sunday when he spoke to the media. But again, it doesn't really matter until September hits and we see what they can do. It's encouraging, but they start to do it. So I don't know. They got to prove it. I like it. I like where they went. I like the way that they built it. It's not going to be rebuilt overnight and suddenly not an issue. Last year they gave up the 283 passing yards a game. There was only 6 programs worse than Tennessee. They gave up more yards per game than Tennessee, and only 3 of those schools were Power 5 schools: Georgia Tech, Duke, and Michigan State, which is kind of surprising. Is they got Mel Tucker down there, who's supposed to be kind of like a defensive guru, but
Is it a bad sign that one of the teams that was worse is where one of the transfers came from?
Probably not a great sign, but again, it depends on how you're used in the system. So,
It's true. It's true.
I mean, how many talented players has Tennessee squandered over the years that ended up in the NFL when they barely did anything at Tennessee? So, you got to trust that Tim Banks and Willie Martinez are going to put these guys in the best positions to succeed.
You would certainly hope so. I mean, Walker had some nice games. 10 tackles against Duke, 7 tackles against Virginia. He's played. He forced a fumble against Northern Illinois and Miami. So, yeah, I mean, he's got good experience. But and other guys that you look at, like a Brandon Turnage, who came in and put up like a monster game against South Carolina last year, totally flashed. And then, I mean, he ended up only playing in 4 games total. So you haven't seen, outside of just that one, game where he went off, haven't seen much from him. But a guy like that, like what if he becomes prolific? He was a transfer from Alabama, and so it's like a guy where you go, okay, well, he had the talent that they wanted, and it get kind of like Turntine. Like maybe he can be that dude. And so
Turnage
hopefully
is going
they
to be
find those pieces.
an important player for Tennessee, regardless of what he does on the field, because he's kind of been somebody they've identified as a leader, somebody that's coaching up the other players on the sidelines, which is really what you need. That takes your defense to another level when you're kind of self coaching. And Turnage is a guy, like I tweeted about it this week. I think he's going to be a secondary coach in the SEC one day. He knows what everybody's supposed to do. If he's on the field, he can help direct traffic or line everybody up, get people where they need to be, make the adjustments. He can be that Alontae Taylor type guy as long as his skills allow him to stay on the field.
I hope so. I mean, in terms of being a defensive back, just the smarts and being in the right place at the right time is so huge. I always said that about Todd Kelly Jr. He wasn't the most athletic dude flying all over the field. He was a little oversized for the position, blah, 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 blah. But he was so often in the right place at the right time. You look at that, he had a great game against Florida when Tennessee beat Florida, had that huge interception. Like, you're just in the right place at the right time, especially, I mean, with an interception. If you can read a quarterback's eyes, if you can make the right moves when playing against a receiver, like it's the whole thing. If you can essentially kind of outsmart your competition, it can be huge. So there's value to that too, even if you're not the most athletic guy. And it seems like Turnage, it's certainly there. And so hopefully, yeah, you got to find those, kind of what we talked about that with the defensive line. You got to find those leaders. You got to find the guys that are going to step up, that are going to be the replacement for the guys that you lost. Hopefully he can be one. And there's plenty of other options, but there's just so much unknown. I mean, I looked at this. Let me see if I can get the list up, where it was starters that were returning, essentially, more or less, because they cycled through a pretty good amount of guys last season. But you have Trevon Flowers, Trey Flowers, Jalen McCullough, and Warren Burrell, which are good pieces. And then just everybody else is just like, didn't play that much. It was injured. It had, all these guys where you just don't know exactly what they might do. I mean, a guy that has been talked up a lot in this fall practice has been Christian Charles, and maybe somebody like that can just come up and be that dude. But outside, I want to give analysis where it's like, yeah, you can look to that guy. He's going to be the pillar that you lean on. I mean, outside of Trey Flowers, who do we truly know? Burrell has shown, he can be good at times, but really,
Deshaun Rucker is somebody that's kind of surprisingly having a pretty solid camp too. Not somebody that you really thought was going to be a factor this year, but could end up playing a decent role.
Maybe, but outside, we just have to. Unfortunately, with this set of players, it's not like on the offense. We just kind of have to speculate.
Mm-hmm.
Just go like, maybe it's going to be this guy, maybe it's going to be that guy, and just give you whatever we can give you from what people have seen at camp, and that's really the bulk of it. And so,
there's two things. It's like you can feel pretty optimistic because it's like a complete overhaul almost, right? Like you just mentioned, you only got 3 guys really coming back that played significant snaps. So maybe a complete overhaul will change this entire unit. At the same time, you had 2 NFL guys in that secondary last year, and they still didn't play very well. What's it going to be like without them? So it could go either way. It's tough.
When I said that, you look back at that Purdue game, it was rough. But there are definitely more pieces. Young
And
talent.
Alante didn't play in that game.
Yeah.
And did Theo Jackson play in that game? I can't remember if he
I
did or
don't.
not. I can't remember if he skipped or not. But obviously, even if he did, you see the impact that not having Alante Taylor made in that game. And that, I mean, man, why'd you have to bring that up? That kind of concerns me now.
It's just the reality of the situation. I don't mean to be a wet blanket, but just with this defense, I said it weeks past. I wish we could get Tim Banks like candid. Just be like, how you really feeling? Like how when you look at this set of players, you've seen good. You know, he came from Penn State. He's seen some guys. Has a good history coaching. How are you really feeling with this set? Because it's really hard. It's so hard to gauge right now. We talked with the defensive line last week, tons of unknowns. We talked with the defensive backs this week, tons of unknowns. The linebackers, you got some good pieces up there, but like your depth pieces, Juwan Mitchell, who knows how that guy's going to play? I don't know. Like, and that's kind of what you're relying on. And really, just my hope is that you just end the season having conversations like, wow, what a star-making surprise performance out of that guy. What a great turn that he had. What an improvement he made. And that's the big talking points that we have at the season. That's what you just kind of have to hope for. Not to be, I'm enthusiastic about the season, and I think Tennessee has the potential to be top 25, top 15, maybe even top 10 team in America this year, depending on how things develop and how guys have improved. But I think they also have the potential to have another rough year on defense. That just is the case. The offense, I think you're pretty set unless you have some injuries. But the defense, we shall see. I wish I could give a different take, but that's the way that things. That's it. That's the way that it is. So, but any further thoughts on what Martinez said, or anything with the defensive backs this year?
Well, I don't think the defense is going to be like a complete disaster or anything. I think you're going to have
No.
a year a lot like last year where the stats don't necessarily tell the whole story. At the same time, there will be some struggles. They'll get burnt on some plays where they shouldn't get burnt, and we'll probably see some frustrating third and short situations or third and medium situations where the defense converts, and it's just completely frustrating for Tennessee fans. But hopefully you see less of that and you just see things move in the right direction. I never expect this defense to be lights out top 10. If they can just be like top 50, I think this team wins 10 games.
I agree. And I think it's completely possible. But it's going to take great coaching from Banks, from Martinez, from everybody on the defensive staff. And it's going to take really these guys just having a chip on their shoulder. Seems like some of them definitely do. And that's good, but just putting in the work, not getting discouraged when things don't go well. And I think, unfortunately, with the setup of this defense, it's kind of prone to that, maybe just because you have to play so many snaps and you're still lacking some depth no matter how you slice it. And you're just going to run into some points in games where you just can't handle the opponent that you're facing, and fighting through that and getting better through that rather than, going, well, screw it, this sucks, and just kind of throwing in the towel. It's that, and that's where the coaching comes in. I mean, that's where Tim Banks and his crew have to come and say, hey, we're going to get better and not get bogged down in this. So, there's that for the most part with the defensive backs. It is hopefully the guys that are supposed to be good senior leaders are, and then thoughts of improvement with the pieces around. I think that's kind of the 1,000-foot view. Improvement. That's the name of the game for Tennessee this offseason.